So far here in Harlow and Citizen Advice Bureau, what have you learnt?
Well, I've learnt that there are some incredibly talented and devoted volunteers here at the Citizens Advice Bureau who really get and understand what the indicators of domestic abuse are, and I'm very impressed to have met the team and to hear the work they're doing here.
So what does that mean, the indicators of abuse?
Well, I think, it's very easy to sort of say, a victim of domestic abuse will know they're a victim of domestic abuse, and they'll walk into the Citizens Advice and they'll say, here I am, I'm a victim of domestic abuse, what do I do? It isn't like that. It is so much more complicated. Getting a victim to understand they're a victim, to identify as a victim, is one of the biggest problems. So actually the questions you ask are not, has your partner ever beaten you? Is your partner abusing you? It's questions like, are you allowed to go out with your friends when you want to? Are you allowed to spend your money when you want to? And people arriving here at Citizens Advice, they'll be arriving with problems with benefits and rent arrears and debts. They could be indicators of many problems. It could be an indicator of a mental health crisis. It could be an indicator of some form of other problem, an addiction problem maybe, but it could also be an indicator that the person who's turned up is actually a victim of domestic abuse, and the reason they're in that financial difficulty is down to an abusive relationship at home. And I think the fact that Citizens Advice are asking those questions and know what to look for means it will be much, much easier to identify those victims.
So how would a scheme like this gauge success?
Well, I think it's finding those additional victims. I mean, one of the things that the government found from the Troubled Families programme, which we ran in the last Parliament and we're running again in this Parliament, was we looked at 120,000 families. We looked at those families because they were workless households, because they may have addiction problems, because the children weren't attending school. What we found is that well over half of those families had domestic abuse that had never been identified. And we cannot tackle this problem if we don't identify the scale of it and know who are the victims. And it's only when we've identified those victims or potential victims that we can take steps to protect them.
Essex Police are taking presenting a lot of people to the Crown Prosecution Service. I see in my court list all the time, assault by beating, and a lot in Harlow. Is that part of the solution, do you think, taking people to court?
Taking people to court is absolutely part of the solution. Going through the criminal justice system and getting a conviction is absolutely one way, but it's not the only way. And actually, we should never forget that a conviction is in many ways a failure because the crime has happened in the first place. My title is Preventing Abuse and Exploitation because I want to see it not happen in the first place. I want steps to be taken. So, for example, we've introduced domestic violence protection orders, which are being used, and they are being used actively. They are civil orders, so you don't have to have reached that criminal level of proof. You can do it on the basis of more likely than not rather than beyond reasonable doubt. You can get an order put on, you can protect the victim, and if the order is breached, then it is a criminal offence and action can be taken. But actually, if we can protect those victims, we can keep those women in their homes with their families, with their children, keep their life as stable as possible, and look at the perpetrators and see what we can do to perhaps help them to understand that their behaviour is wrong, so that we don't end up with a crime that is a physical crime happening or an emotional and mental crime happening. We can stop that crime happening. That's got to be better for society.
Finally, what's your message to the public? Because I'll give you an example, and this is actually probably about 200 metres where Estina Bunny died. My daughter on Sunday, walking down to the shops, there's a woman sitting in the middle of the road crying her eyes out, and she's gauging this as domestic. My daughter went to try and help out. Her partner was very much, do not get involved. And that's a split, isn't it? And people saying, don't get involved because, it's complicated for the public, isn't it?
It is. I grew up in a pub. My dad's a pub landlord. And I remember, in the 1980s where it was the norm to say, it's a domestic, just leave it, it's nothing to do with us. We've moved on an awful long way. Society has moved on. Actually, I have seen, the training that's given to police, that's given to other agencies, that's given to volunteers here at the CAB. But victims will be believed. Come forward. Don't be shy. Go to Crime Stoppers. That's an anonymous reporting tool that can be used by anybody. Or report it to the local police. Or report it to the health service or to social services. There are people you can go to, and I would encourage anybody where you think that there's a problem, don't be shy. Come forward. Report it, because you might just be helping somebody who is in a situation that could get considerably worse, and you can be responsible for helping to stop it.
Well, Mr. Blunney's been here today. You've been to Parliament with him. You campaigned in Parliament. What is it ending now? What's the ongoing process regarding domestic violence in Harlow for you?
Well, the most important thing is to learn the lessons of what happened to the tragedy that happened to Estina Blunney and her unborn daughter Rose. And that's one of the reasons why I brought the Minister down and to meet with Mr. Blunney, so we could learn some of the things that have gone wrong, and that can be reflected in government thinking. I mean, in Essex we have some of the highest reported domestic violence in the country. In Harlow we have to openly acknowledge and be truthful that this is a significant problem. But as I say, we're lucky that we have safer places. We're going on there now to go and see safer places, because they are an incredible charity, incredible organisation that does so much to help domestic violence abuse victims. And I visited their refuges on a number of occasions, and they are an example of best practice. They deal with prevention and they deal with the victims and they look after them. And I'm hoping that the Minister will see that and see what can be replicated across the country.
Robert, thank you very much. Thank you.